Hey guys, this is Lainey here, and today I'm going to walk you through my design process for the Courtland Street Bridge in Atlanta, Georgia. First, I'll walk you through why I chose the specific positions of the footings and bents, and then I'll move on to the girder design for each span. The first bent location was provided for me by Michael Baker International. The second bent location was chosen in order to miss the existing footing as well as the concrete tunnel filled with miscellaneous utilities. A larger span was not as big of a concern here, so I tried to keep the spans under 140 feet along this stretch of the bridge. The third bent location was chosen in order to stay under the 140-foot span length, but also stay far enough away from the railroad tracks in order to ease construction and provide a safer construction environment. To the left of this bent is also a loading dock and ramp that could not be blocked. The fourth bent location was provided for me by Michael Baker International. The fifth bent location is where I started to create smaller spans in order to use smaller beams, therefore allowing a larger clear height for traffic below. I wanted all of these spans to stay under 100 feet long. If I moved the bent any to the left, it would have either hit a water line or an existing footing. If I moved the bent to the right, I would be running into several issues. The first being that the span would be over 100 feet, and then second being that I would potentially run into existing footings. And the third issue would be that the bent would be blocking that existing drive. The sixth bent location had similar issues to the fifth bent. This bent foundation is very close to two existing footings, but there should be just enough clearance to place the new footings without undermining the existing ones. The seventh bent location is quite close to an existing gas line, so there is potential to move this bent to the opposite side of the existing footing, but then you run into the existing water line. This bent location would benefit in getting the exact location of the gas line in order to ensure it does not get hit during construction. The 8th and 9th bent location did not have much wiggle room. With the road going under the bridge and sidewalks and columns on either side, it was essential to place the new bents right outside of these existing columns. This allows for a span of less than 100 feet and also doesn't intrude on any existing walking paths for the community. Unfortunately, the foundation of bent 9 will involve some rerouting of electrical lines, but will not involve extensive work. The location of bent 10 and 11 were placed in order to keep the span under 100 feet. Bent 11 could potentially move to the left of the existing footing and still have less than a 100-foot span on either side, but would run into the issue of having both a gas line and a water line that would need to be relocated. Bent 10 is really close to a 15-inch RCP pipe, but using the smaller footing configuration with micropiles, it should have ample space to clear this pipe. If there were no clear height requirements under this bridge, I would suggest moving bent 12 completely and having a larger span here. Since there is plenty of foot traffic through this area, it is important to make sure the community is safe. With that being said, I added bent 12 here in order to create smaller spans and therefore allowing shallower beams to be placed here. There were not a lot of options as to where bent 12 could go, since there are openings on either side of the bridge. Now for the girder design. I used GDOT's preliminary beam sizing charts to determine the preliminary girder size as well as the typical spacing. Span 1 is approximately 137 feet and 3 inches, therefore requiring a 65-inch bulb tee. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 2 is 130 feet and 0 inches. Therefore requiring a 65-inch bulb tee. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 3 is 127 feet and 6 inches, therefore requiring a 65-inch bulb tee. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 4 is 99 feet and 9 inches, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb tee. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 5 is 98 feet and 0 inches long, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb tee. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 6 is 61 feet and 1 inch long, therefore requiring a type 3 beam. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. A design alternative for this span is to use a 54-inch bulb T with the maximum spacing of 15 feet center to center. This would allow for a deeper beam, but would require less beams. This would speed up construction time, but also decrease the clear height, so it may be safe to stick with the type 3 beam. Span 7 is 83 feet and 4 inches long, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb T. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 8 is 94 feet and 11 inches long, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb T. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 9 is 83 feet and 11 inches, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb T. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 10 is 94 feet and 5.5 inches long, therefore requiring a 54-inch bulb T. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 11 is 71 feet and 6 inches long, therefore requiring a type 3 beam. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Span 12 is 52 feet and 2 inches long, therefore requiring a type 2 beam. The maximum spacing for this beam type and span is 10 feet center to center. Using these girder sizes and spacings, each span would have a total of 6 beams. This would result in a total of 72 beams and 13 vents. The spacing and number of required beams can deviate from these values pending the design compressive strength of the concrete used when constructing these beams. And that is my design process for the Courtland Street Bridge in Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks for watching!